Now, your election as a councillor back in 2002 coincided more or less with the start of a major challenge to the college from the ACCC. How did that come about and what happened?
There were concerns in the community and in some jurisdictions, health departments, that the college was inhibiting the entry of overseas trained surgeons into Australia as fully recognised surgical specialists, and there were some concerns that our selection into surgical training was too rigorous and that we should be more liberal and allow people into surgical training if they expressed an interest. And the college was challenged by the ACCC using trade practices legislation, and we had to respond. We engaged with the ACCC in an exercise to obtain authorisation to continue to conduct our business, and working parties were established, particularly to look at the assessment of international medical graduates and to look at the criteria for selection into surgical training. And as a result of a great deal of work, the college was authorised to continue to do those things and to be the organisation that trains and qualifies surgeons in Australia and New Zealand.
Now, at that time, in what seems to be a fairly heated debate, often the college was described from time to time as excessively conservative, an old boys club, and a self-protecting monopoly where the training of surgeons was concerned. Did that fairly reflect the college's position, do you think?
I don't think it did. We've always felt that we were a very strong body in relation to standards of surgical education and the quality of surgical practice. In order to train a surgeon, we believe that you need a proper training program and a proper training environment, and you need to develop an accreditation process for surgical training posts where training occurs. And there's a limited number of those places that will meet reasonable accreditation standards that will properly train somebody and also enable them to have a reasonably good chance of passing the qualifying exam and then going into practice as a competent surgeon. And there's always been a tension between the college and some hospitals and health departments about posts that are suitable for training. The college has always maintained a high standard, always will maintain a high standard in that regard.
It must have been some intense discussion both inside the college and outside it. What form did that take and what was your role in it?
We were engaged with working parties that involved people from government and hospitals and lawyers, and we worked out ways of improving our internal processes and developed policies that ultimately were to the satisfaction of the ACCC and all external observers, and that included the Australian Medical Council, which is the body that oversees the training processes and standards of all of the specialist medical colleges in Australia. All of that was done, and we did achieve the authorisation that we sought at the time. That continued for 5 years, and more recently we have decided not to continue with that authorisation. We believe that our processes are legally sound, fair and reasonable, and we have all of our fellows adhere to them in all of our activities, and we believe we are now compliant with the trade practices legislation requirements, and we do not need the authorisation that we formerly had. It was a difficult process for the college to go through at the time, but we emerged stronger and I think better for having undergone that process.
And the agreement that was finally reached with the ACCC became a model for the other medical colleges in Australia?
It did. All of the other medical specialist colleges in Australia went through the same process and achieved authorisation, and most of them still have continuing authorisation as I understand it. Our college, of course, is binational and includes New Zealand, and there's a similar body in New Zealand which authorised our activities in New Zealand, mainly by scrutinising what had been done by the ACCC. There was no further detailed scrutiny, but they authorised our activities quite readily in New Zealand.
And that agreement with the ACCC, did it mean substantial changes to the way the college went about training and accreditation then?
It had a number of effects. It meant the establishment of policies for selection into training that were fully compliant with what are known as the Brennan Principles, which are a set of fair and reasonable standards for selection into any competitive selection process. We had to make sure that all of our specialty groups, of which there are 9, were all doing the same thing. And in regard to international medical graduates, we developed a structured system where, after a very thorough assessment of training and experience, and followed up usually with structured interviews and looking at peer-reviewed audit of performance, we were able to categorise international medical graduates as either not comparable, which meant they had to undergo our training and examination process, partially comparable, which meant they could do some supervised training and then sit the exam, or substantially comparable, which meant working for 1 year under oversight, and if that was satisfactory, they could apply for fellowship of the college without examination. And that method of assessment has been adopted now by the other specialist medical colleges, and is the standard that the Australian Medical Council sets for the assessment of international medical graduates. And that transfers then to the medical board and the registration of such people as specialists, and that is the broad principle that will apply to overseas trained doctors applying for recognition with the Medical Board of Australia, which comes into effect on the 1st of July.
And is that generally proving satisfactory and acceptable both to the overseas doctors who are coming in and to the people who are looking for them to take up employment in this country?
Yes, it is. It's a very reasonable system. It's easy to understand, and there have been very few complaints or appeals about the process in recent times.
One must, I suppose, recall the case of Dr. Jayant Patel, though. That would suggest that there was a loophole there somewhere.
There was a failure to follow the recommended procedures in that particular situation, that the College of Surgeons was not asked at any time to assess that individual's qualifications. The processes were in place then that should have involved the college in assessing his competence, but it didn't happen.